I'm Barbie Collins-Young. I am part of our Balance in Mind team with the Lake Washington School Foundation, and I've been working in youth mental health for the past year. I'm a youth mental health first aid trainer, and I am so happy to have all of you here. So thank you for taking some time out of your Sunday afternoon. Go Seahawks. We'll be done in time, don't worry. I wanted to give a couple of thank yous. And first to Life Community Church, thank you so much for offering up your space, helping promote the event, and for everything you do for the community. Also for the great sledding hill at Winterfest, trucking in all the snow yesterday. So Life Community Church is in the community for the community, and that's why we're all here today. I also wanted to thank Janet Richards for instigating events like this by doing the Real Talk event last month in Redmond. And our Balance in Mind team, I wanted to introduce them. We have some in the front row. So we have Vanessa and Allison. And then we have the Lake Washington School Foundation Executive Director, Helen Cernett, with us today. And Val's going to tell you a little bit more about what our group does. And then I also wanted to make note, we have a special guest in the audience today. So we have City Council member for Kirkland, Neil Black, who's here. And I know he wanted to say a quick word about why you're here today.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to mention that I'm here in a dual capacity. One, I'm the parent of two teenage boys, one 14 and 17. So in our home, we are talking about these issues and dealing with the issues of stress and anxiety and mental health for our teens. So we're parents, my wife and I, so I'm here in that capacity, but I'm also here as a public servant, one of many who care a lot about this issue of teen mental health and want to hear and learn from experts and leaders on this issue. And then also it's all part of us as community leaders being very mindful of these issues and thinking a lot about how even our city programs either contribute to greater stress and anxiety for our youth or ways that we can structure our programs in the city to actually help with this issue. So just thinking about this from every different possible point of view. So here as a parent and as one of our community leaders, and just really happy that everyone's out and can't wait to hear from the leaders and experts on this issue. So thank you. First,
I'd like to introduce to you Susie Kroll. And she's a mental health professional, and she's a crisis negotiator. And she's got on her official gear today. Correction on our takeaway sheet, though, she works with the school resource officers. She's not the actual school resource officer. But she earned her Master's of Arts in Counseling Psychology from City University in Seattle. And she's an alum of the University of Washington, with a Bachelor of Arts in Speech Communication and a Bachelor of Science in Zoology with a marine emphasis. So
I know,
she's
and zoos.
I feel like you
Clearly it didn't work
might have made a career change there. And then she became a clinician with a community mental health agency upon her graduation with a counseling psychology degree. And while employed by this agency, she promoted to clinic manager, regional operations director, division director, overseeing the day-to-day operations of 6 outpatient mental health, primary care, and substance use recovery centers. And she gained her assessment and crisis experience by working in King County emergency departments, providing psychological assessments, making treatment recommendations, working with the Involuntary Treatment Act Court, and starting co-responder models in 6 police departments in King and Snohomish County. She's got a little bit of experience, right? And she's a national speaker and educator on crisis response, mental health, and de-escalation with the Elite Speakers Bureau. She instructs at the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission for the Police Academy. Oh, but that's not all. She's an adjunct professor at City University, and she loves golden retrievers.
That's the important thing. That's the important thing. Everything else is garbage, but
yes.
Golden retrievers.
So currently, she co-responds with the King County Sheriff's Office departments in Shoreline, Kenmore, Redmond, Bothell, Kirkland, and Lake Forest Park Police Departments. She is a very busy woman right now. And additionally, she's a trained crisis and hostage negotiator, mental health professional with the King County Sheriff's Office Crisis Negotiations Team. Woo, there's Susie. And then we have Valerie Horvath, who I'm very proud is our esteemed leader of Balance in Mind, which is powered by the Lake Washington School Foundation. She is a parent of 2 Lake Washington School District graduates, and during much of her teens years, she didn't realize all the stresses that they were dealing with. When her child started having anxiety and stress that impacted schooling, she was at a loss. Out of her experience looking for support for her child and for herself, she realized the need for acknowledgement and support of parents struggling with the same issues. She, working with other parents, started Balance in Mind to raise awareness of mental health challenges and provide some support on how to find those answers. Thanks, Val. And then we have 2 wonderful young people on our panel today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. If you want to grab a microphone, Ava, and you can just share a little bit about yourself.
Okay, hi, my name is Ava. I'm her daughter, the one that struggles with mental illness. And I'm here because I've had my fair share of anxiety and depressive episodes and just, hard experiences that I've had to struggle to overcome. And I want to do my best to make a difference with other people who are also struggling and help educate and do whatever I can. So yeah. Oh, and I'm 18.
And she's 18, yes. And then we have Matthew.
Hi, I'm Matthew. I'm 17. I'm a senior at Lake Washington High School currently. I was asked greatly by Allison to come and just talk. I have been navigating my own mental health and been surrounded by a lot of others who have either, had mental health issues or kind of working through them with them. And at Lake Washington High School, there's been a lot of trials and tribulations that a lot of the students have went to. I know some of you may know about some of the occurrences there in the past few years. So I've been fortunate enough to know a lot of the people and help a lot of the people and hopefully provide some answers for you guys today.
Thank you, Matthew. I think it's going to be great to have some different perspective, kind of looking inward on this. So thank you guys so much for being here. And then we have Janine McConaughey. She's a PhD, an author, and a speaker. And she's on the board of directors for Attachment and Trauma Network. She's a retired teacher and a professor emeritus. She taught every age from preschool to graduate school during her 40-year career, completed a PhD in educational leadership. She's from Colorado. And after an intensive healing journey with significant childhood trauma, she now devotes her time to writing, speaking at universities and national conferences, and blogging on topics relating to mental health. She also serves on the board of directors of the Attachment and Trauma Network, and she grew up in a pastor's home and credits her survival to her father's steadfast care after she was abused at a home daycare when she was 3. So her story of healing is told in Brave. So she has written several books. She has Brave, a personal story of childhood healing and trauma, and Jeannie's Brave Childhood, Behavior and Healing Through the Lens of Attachment and Trauma. So there's a prequel coming, which will hopefully help everyone understand and better serve those who have suffered childhood trauma. And they have recently relocated to the beautiful Pacific Northwest. Their kids convinced them to do so. So we're really proud to have you here today. And our last panelist is Christy Nicholson. She's with Youth Eastside Services. She's got a lot of letters after her name. So MC, MHP, SU, DP. She's a director of school-based behavioral health for Youth Eastside Services. And she has over 30 years experience working with adolescents and families in the areas of mental health and wellness, substance abuse, and the impacts of addiction on families. And so currently she oversees a team of 16 behavioral health specialists working in the Bellevue and Lake Washington school districts. You guys have some big jobs up there, so really, really grateful to have you here today. Christy's also brought a lot of additional pamphlets that you'll want to get on the way out that I think you'll find to be very good resources. And Yes has been incredible in our community for really making a difference.
Yeah, so I've been really fortunate to have parents that have been really open with me for my entire life. And up until high school, I kind of didn't have names or to kind of put on a lot of feelings I was having. So, I mean, I think in high school and kind of meeting a lot of different people, it gave me a lot of context to maybe the things I was feeling that I didn't really realize to a certain extent. And so I think that it can start at kind of any level with your parents. It doesn't have to be full-fledged finding a solution the first time you talk to them. It can start at a really base level. It can just go from, because a lot of kids may not have a dialogue with their parents. How did your day go? Any little minute detail from your emotion to really anything that happened, it can start there, and it can really build up, because if you can kind of build the relationship with your parents where it starts at that base level, it's going to be a lot easier if a problem does arise, that a kid is going to feel a lot more comfortable going to their parent first versus another maybe less healthy outlet. Yeah.
So for me personally, I grew up in a household where emotions weren't necessarily discussed a huge amount. Not that it was, bad, but I didn't really have any conception of mental health, of depression, of anxiety, of any, mental illness. And so once I started feeling emotions that I didn't know what they were, that were really uncomfortable, that were overwhelming, sad, whatever it may be, overthinking everything, I was left very confused and scared, and I felt very lonely because I literally had no clue that anybody else felt like that until, my actions started showing that I wasn't doing very well, even though I didn't know that I wasn't doing well. And so my parents kind of picked up from that point, that there was something bigger going on, that my actions weren't superficial, that there was a reason, that I was acting out and stuff like that. And it's an uncomfortable subject. It's a very uncomfortable subject, especially when you don't talk about it super openly in your household. So it was definitely awkward at first, I would have to say. But, we've gotten to a point now where it's natural. It's something that we're super open about. We talk all the time about, and we both experience mental health issues. So after hearing that she was also struggling in some ways, that I was struggling, it really made it easier, I guess, to open up and have some sort of similarity. So, yeah.
As the mom in question. I do have some thoughts. I came to this not really realizing my own struggles with anxiety. And through the course of what my daughter went through, I realized I actually do have some serious anxiety problems, which one of the best things that ever happened to me was getting a counselor for myself to help figure out what I saw my daughter going through. She was acting out, she was doing things, but how do you know if it's typical teen? Is it an age and a stage, or is it something more? And I didn't have that framework or that vocabulary to work with when this started. Had I had that, I think we would have had there would have been a different trajectory, but who knows? Probably. Yeah. A little bit smoother, maybe. Yeah, but it's part of the process, right? And it was really, really rough for a long time when we were both going through my anxiety and her anxiety and depression. And the rest of the family was just hiding.
That's true. Very true.
It was a tough time, but I think as a parent, the thing I would say is listen to your spidey sense, because even though I wasn't sure if this was an age or a stage, I knew there was something was going on. And then, of course, trying to get your child to talk to a therapist or anything like that, boy, that's a whole nother process. But the spidey sense said, there's something here, and I didn't know what it was because I didn't have those tools. So listen to that would be my thought.
Well, I also just wanted to note, and I actually have a question for Ava and Matthew, but both of you and Val mentioned having that lack of the language, the lack of the vocabulary. And I think as a person really who's been thinking a lot about how does a community agency, so working both clinically but also in the schools, trying to support young people, how do we, my thinking is, how do we help with that, not only the vocabulary and the language, so you can recognize what you're experiencing and distinguish it kind of from, well, just stress and kind of normal stress to, no, there's something else going on and I really kind of need some help with this. And I'm kind of wondering, so there's been some efforts with social emotional learning, with some education and health class and other kinds of things. How are we doing? I mean, are you finding that there's more opportunities in the schools? What's kind of your observations about the state of that?
I went to Lake Washington High School, as did Matthew, and it's no secret that there's some mental health issues going on there. And my depression was severe enough so that I had to drop out of high school temporarily. Because there wasn't the support that I needed at my high school. Nobody discussed mental health. Nobody knew what the signs were, what the red flags that were going on. My teachers, even though, I was very open about what I was experiencing because I was using my high school counselor to try and help me, communicate with my teachers, they still weren't very helpful, I guess. Some of them were, but some of them also didn't take it seriously. And because of that, I had no extra wiggle room. And so, yeah, it was difficult to get the support that I needed and to be able to understand that what I'm experiencing isn't my fault and that a lot of kids feel it too. And that, there are things that you can do to still be a student, but still take care of yourself first and foremost.
And you were lucky in that you had a great counselor.
Oh, yeah.
Who worked, bent over backwards, did whatever she could to get you okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to get you graduated.
Yeah, my counselor was amazing. But even at my school, the use of counselors wasn't really solicited. Nobody really knew that you could use your high school counselors to help you get help. So, my mom kind of took control over that situation, which was good, which is what I needed. Yeah, no, that's not a bad thing because I couldn't do it for myself at that time. So having you, work with the Lake Washington School District and know that counselors are available was really helpful for me to find a path.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything Ava said. I think at my school specifically, something maybe that could help in the future would just be, while it's a whole another conversation of kids kind of realizing maybe that there's something more going on with themselves, if they do come to that realization, just more kind of meeting in the middle or farther from the middle towards the student on the teacher's end, because while they are aware that it's an issue, it's never, if it's told to them directly, it's never going to be, in my experience, something that's really accommodated for. I'm not speaking for all teachers, obviously. There's a lot of really great teachers and counselors at my school who are helping people every day. But I think if it can become more of a normal to for teachers to kind of bend a little bit where they're not used to, because that's really what the kids need. So yeah.
I heard you both mention, well, our counselors, or at least some of our counselors, who tend to get more training like that, right? And I supervise behavioral health support specialists who are at the high schools, but they're very few hours. And then there are evergreen behavioral health social workers there as well, which have been added really over the last just couple of years, I think partly in response to this. But there's not a lot of training done for teachers, for all that whole staff. And I'm just hearing, I already know this is an issue, but I'm really kind of hearing that reinforced by what the two of you are saying.
I did teacher education for 33 years, and we did not talk about this. And so my heart breaks when I hear this because it was my story too. You know, I was that teenager who desperately needed someone to realize I was struggling. And of course, if you think nobody talks about it now, you ought to be this age. I mean, it was just not even talked about. But I think that, and that's one reason that I decided to step out and, kind of put writing books on hold and support the Attachment and Trauma Network, because that is exactly what we're trying to do with our conferences, is to help teachers to understand what these kids need. And so when I sat in a room with over 1,000 educators last year at the conference, and it was like, oh my goodness, we're getting this. It's just that we have so far to go. And so we need an army. And so I think that when I listen to them, no, we didn't have vocabulary for it. We didn't have any way to express what our emotions were. I was 60 when I ended out in therapy, and I didn't have any words to express what I was going through, and hadn't my entire life. So to see them get help at this age, yes, absolutely. So, and anything that you can do to support your schools and your teachers in going to conferences and learning. And my lane is trauma and attachment, but there's many more lanes, and trauma covers a lot of different things. But I think that our schools just need the support in helping the teachers to understand this.
My training and background is in trauma and violence and crisis and de-escalation. And so for the time that I was in an outpatient setting providing therapy, here were some things that I thought about, and here's what I provided to the folks that I was giving therapy to. One, I would like you to consider this kind of methodology or imagery. If all of us were standing on the side of a river and just enjoying ourselves, and we saw a bunch of baby bassinets with babies in them going down the river, and we knew about a mile down the river, downstream, that there was a 100-foot or so waterfall, what would we all be doing? We would all be jumping in the water to grab as many baby bassinets as we possibly could. Invariably, though, as we're grabbing all these baby bassinets, we see that they keep coming. And we do what? We miss a couple. At some point, a couple of us in the river need to get out, walk upstream, and figure out where the babies are going in. That is a model for prevention. So while I am a huge proponent, especially as a licensed therapist and a crisis negotiator, of folks, once they feel there is an issue, going and seeking help, I'm an even bigger proponent of doing behavioral health and mental health care before there's an issue. This is intrinsic to somebody's overall health, as wellness baby checks, as yearly physicals, as getting, aches and pains or sores or whatever checked. This is something you do to prevent and to build the skills necessary so that when and if stressors come, when and if mental health symptoms come, when and if anxiety or depression or something like schizophrenia or another brain and mental health disorder with some significant symptoms rear symptomology for that person, that there are skills in place. And I don't just advocate this for the person that is having the issue or feels as though something is impending. I advocate this for the folks that work within that person's life system. That's mom, dad, grandma, caregiver. That is a significant person in their life because, as you well heard, Mom was able to gain some skills and recognize in herself some things that were valuable that then were impartable to her child. And this is very much what can happen when somebody who believes nothing is wrong and is perfectly healthy and has all the supports they need, learn the language, learn the verbiage, and can have some insight into, one, their own behaviors and feelings and emotions, and then have that self-awareness to have the recognition for someone else. To that end, I practice what I preach. I have seen the same counselor every Thursday from about 10 plus years ago till now, because as you can imagine with the work that I do and what I see when I go to 911 calls, for me to not want to run screaming out of the building and have a bunch of issues and PTSD and trauma related to what I see, I have to take care of myself, and it is wholly preventative.
Well, I'm appreciating what you had to say. I don't know that the answer about kind of how to make the connections from that kind of other end going in towards the schools. But I'm thinking it really fits with what our representative had talked about in terms of kind of these different pathways and sort of wearing different hats and sort of what can we do from this point of view. And so I think it was Thursday evening, I was up in the city of Sammamish, and we were having sort of a dialogue like this about similar issues, but we really were talking about this idea of collaborative paths forward. And so I had broken that down for myself into, well, what can we do in the schools? What can we do kind of with and for and as parents and family members? And what about our communities? And by communities, I'm thinking, it's communities of faith. It might be the Boys and Girls Club. It might be the Teen Center. Any way where we come together kind of as groups in our communities, and what can we do there? So certainly cities obviously are part of that. But also then, what about the health professionals? So not one or the other, but I think we all need to on those pathways. And I loved what you said about getting down to the simplicity piece of it. And I think that's sort of what you're talking about as well, even from the professional point of view. It's sort of like, what does it boil down to? Well, listening, making, I think educating ourselves is part of it about what's going on. I don't mean like educating, like getting degrees and that kind of disconnected educating, but what's happening. So listening to people, what they're experiencing. And then that part about relationship, that's so important. Even if it is simply like, I say to myself, like, okay, I'm walking in the grocery store and I try to make eye contact with people and say hello, not just young people, but maybe most especially young people, because I think there sort of is a bit of a divide. I think there's kind of always been generational divides, which when I was young, I didn't really think about or understand. But now it's sort of like, wow, I mean, we speak different languages to a certain extent. We have different cultures. And so we need to kind of find our ways to kind of bridge that. So really thinking about that exact question. What can happen from kind of my starting point, and how can I connect up with others? And you just brought back in that piece about like, oh, from the other end, how can that open up? So how could the cities, how could the police, how could, other kinds, the schools, how could they reach out to people who have something to give as well as us offering it?
The youth mental health first aid trainings that are available in our community are fabulous. This is what I wish I had had before we started on this journey. It would have helped me with the vocabulary. Once I took it, it helped really put in perspective what I saw my daughter doing. The point of this, though, was really that part of the mental health training talked about a gentleman, Kevin Hines, I think is his name, who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and actually survived. And the thing that was the takeaway for me out of that was he said, if one person had stopped and said, "How are you doing?" I wouldn't have done it. So I have taken that and internalized it in my own life, and I encourage one, take the class because it's incredible. But two, you never know when someone is cranky or aloof or disengaged. I smile at everyone to the embarrassment of my daughter.
She really does. I'm not joking. She really does.
And I will converse with almost anyone for exactly the same reason, because I never know what that might mean or not mean to that person at all. And I don't want to be the person that lets another Kevin Hines go by.
And notably, it's not that it was what you were going to say. I think sometimes we're afraid, well, if we ask that, we don't know what to do, right? We're not qualified. But the fact of it is, he didn't say that then they went on to, provide mental health training right on the spot. It was just, or mental health counseling right on the spot. It was, they just noticed me and made the connection and asked how I was. Very simple.
A lot of the information when I started trying to understand my own story, a lot of the information was at a clinician level. And even though, I have a PhD, but I'm not a clinician, so my knowledge base is in a completely different area. And so when I started trying to understand trauma and anxiety and, all of the symptoms that come out of many different things, I realized that there just wasn't a lot of material available that was not from a clinical perspective. There were memoirs where people told about their stories, and then there were clinicians who told about clients who had been through these types of stories. And so I think that I thought everybody needs to understand this. Everyone needs to have materials where they understand trauma and they understand mental health and mental illness at a very deep level, because then you are able to help, you're able to run up and get the bassinets from going down the creek, because you know those kinds of discussions to have before it gets to an emergency situation. And so, so that's kind of what I try to do, is to bring that down to a level where everyone, and I think that I really wanted to say this comment after you talked, because I feel like everyone has a place where they can be part of the solution to this problem. And every one of us has to figure out what our lane is and where we can do that. And we got a lot of different lanes up here on this platform. And I think that's a wonderful picture of what everyone is doing to try to solve the problem.
At the end of one of the segments of crisis intervention training that I provided the Police Academy is a statement that I make to every law enforcement officer that comes through the academy. All too often, the folks that we encounter have had their ability to make decisions and have self-efficacy taken away from them. And obviously, in a law enforcement arena, when we're balancing the criminality and the crisis, there is that element of power being taken away. The single most important thing we can do for a person in crisis is to bear witness and listen. It doesn't matter whether you have a PhD or you're a counselor or you're a chaplain or you're Bob on the corner. When you've heard a couple of the panelists speak about the level of isolation and statements like, I had no clue that anyone else felt like this, or I had no idea that I was even going through this, that just speaks volumes to somebody that does not have a connection enough to feel comfortable reaching out. So the single most significant thing we can do, regardless of credentialing, regardless of education, and regardless of capability, is to bear witness to someone. Not offer a solution, not be the quick problem solver, not have the best referral, not have the most clients, not run into a building that's on fire, not any of that. It's to sit with somebody and say, frankly, I am so sorry that this sucks, but we're gonna hang out together and you're not by yourself. And in the course of doing that, whether you're a licensed counselor, where we talk about building that relationship and seeing somebody right where they're at, or you're a hostage negotiator trying to make sure that somebody isn't getting hurt in a building and that hostages or a crisis can be resolved, is to just be with that person.
Well, back in the day, I didn't want to do anything unless I was obligated to, and the only thing the kids are really obligated to do is go to school. Right? And who are they supposed to see for 8 hours of the day? Their teachers. They're not obligated to see their counselors. They're not obligated to see anybody else other than those teachers, to sit in class and to learn. They are the people who you spend the most time with. They're the ones that are going to see your behavior, see changes, see those red flags. And you need to be able to, like you said, feel safe. And I mean, it's just, mental health is such a complex topic, but like you guys were saying, there's such a simple solution. It's just to sit there, ask, are you okay? Do you need help? Can we give you a little bit of wiggle room? Can we sit down, have a plan? Maybe that's change your grade from from a letter grade to a pass to fail, to take off some of the pressure. Anything, literally anything, because so much of what's happening right now is a lot of teachers don't understand the severity of mental health and the things that you need to ask, the things that you need to say. Just, I don't know, maybe in some way providing more mandatory, what's it called?
Teacher training?
That's the one, yep. Yeah, no, it's true. Definitely.
That is my mantra.
Mandatory teacher training, and also like,
Building staff training.
yeah, why is it important to learn math or science or art or anything if we don't feel like living? You know what I mean? You are the only person that can make a difference. You're the only person that can change your reality, but you need help. You need to have those basic learning blocks. How are you supposed to learn and get a college degree if you're so depressed, if you can't go to school? You need to prioritize yourself, take care of yourself first. and teachers can really help and aid that process to make sure that it goes smooth. Well, maybe not smooth, because healing isn't linear, but but smoother, yeah, definitely. I think that a great starting place would be to provide more support for the teachers and to help them train.
I think that that's a giant piece that I'd like to emphasize as a co-responding mental health professional. We ask so much of our teachers, of our police officers, of our firefighters. Obviously, as a first responder, I've got a little bit of a dog in that fight, where what you initially set out to do as a teacher or a police officer or a firefighter has now morphed into so many pieces that integrate in social services, behavioral health, mental health. And when I say behavioral health and mental health interchangeably, mental health is one piece of that, but behavioral health actually encompasses issues with substance abuse as well. So you're asking our first responders, our teachers, to have this element of social work and recognition that many are not taught and qualified to do. But entities like the police academies, the fire academies, and teaching groups are coming in and trying to assert a level of skill and recognition to the individuals that are seeing this, so that then intervention and prevention can be put into place. And I'm a big fan of having the ability to recognize, and I'm an even bigger fan of the folks that would be most privy to seeing changes have at least some recognition, so there isn't a bunch of fear around a student or somebody walking up and saying X, Y, Z to that person and them feeling as though they have a level of responsibility to solve the problem. But then to have the wherewithal to reach out to the folks that would be most effective to help that individual. And that could be a licensed clinician, that could be a peer support specialist, that could be a pediatrician, that could be a counselor, that could be a church group, that could be a youth group, it could be many different things. And having just, there's a reason they call it mental health first aid, having that first aid triage capability is what will take the pressure off folks whose initial jobs were not to do this. I work with cops every day who don't want to be social workers and counselors, but as vehemently as they don't want to be social workers and counselors, they want to help and they want to save lives. So they get the triage expertise, and then they have a co-responder or a mental health professional that they can access in order to get that. Let's get instructors, teachers, teachers' aides, school staff very well aware of what it looks like to triage something, and then the direction in which we point them to make sure that somebody gets the supports around them. Because the worst thing that we can do is have somebody trying to do something in isolation, whether it's a care provider or somebody experiencing the behavioral health or mental health issue on their own.
Well, particularly, as you mentioned, you go to your therapy regularly, right? So,
Yes, I do.
So, because that's the other piece of that is, and I'm not saying anything about kind of teachers with any kind of a critical nuance at all. I just really feel like they have not had the training, and it's not what they signed up for, and it's not what they were educated in, and they find themselves where they need it desperately. So how can we partner to provide that, and then also have in place the supports and have them educated about kind of how to connect with those supports, both at the schools and then at the health agencies in the community, or just places where you can be in relationship, as you mentioned, like Boys and Girls Club. I mean, sometimes it doesn't take kind of mental health training in that, right?
I'm a big imagery nerd, and I keep seeing you raise your hand, and I promise I'll ask. How many people are CPR certified? Do you fully believe that you will practice CPR on somebody and then after they're back and breathing, they'll get up and go home? No, they're going to the hospital, right? We're calling fire, or we're getting an ambulance and they're going to the hospital. When we're talking about a level of mental health triage, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about enough to get the person connected to the bigger piece of the puzzle that will help solve the problem. It's very much like that.
Can I just say, as I went through my healing journey and I thought about who helped me along the way and who failed me along the way, it all came down to one word, which was kind of a part of my story, but the word was flinch. The people who helped me did not flinch. And when I went to talk to them and I went to share my story, they just looked at me and they sat with me. And they did not flinch, no matter what what horrible part of my story that I told. And I don't know how many times I told my therapist, you never flinched. You never flinched. I can't believe you didn't flinch. And so I think that, yes, it is the triage. And in part of that triage is that ability to sit with the person and not with no judgment in your mind as to what that is, and to just sit and hold space for them while you get them help.
So in the school district, like Washington School District, I'll speak to specifically, they have started working with social emotional learning. So in elementary school, where that is the goal, is to really incorporate that so that it's universal, so that students are at an early age learning a vocabulary and also learning skills to sort of take care of their own emotions and that. Then at the middle school level, in this past year, we've had a longstanding partnership, Youth Eastside Services and the Lake Washington School District, but this year in particular, they really stretched and contracted with us to provide 20 hours of behavioral health. So as Susie had said, that's mental health and substance abuse. So it's really the training context that the counselor has coming in more than it is necessarily divides up into those issues at the school, particularly at the middle school level. But they're there and they're partnering and they're working around with the SBIRT effort, the Screening, Brief Intervention, and Referral to Treatment, which has largely been happening in the 7th grade. But that really is looking at where are the strengths, where are the needs? How could we build plans to intervene, both individually, but also what do we learn about our particular schools? So looking at that data, like that point that you just put out with a 39%, but not just like, oh no, then it's like, okay, what can we do with this? Can we partner in the health classes, and can we teach how to deal with stress in a positive way? Or what is stress, and what's different between stress and anxiety, et cetera. And so they're really very busy doing that, both with the school staff, although, and I think we're talking about the teachers for a reason, because there's been a fair amount of partnering with the school counseling teams, and they've had a fair amount of training, and they're responding to this. But I think that's the place where we haven't really managed to universalize this yet, is with the teachers and that. So these are those kind of prevention efforts that Susie was talking about, kind of starting that out early. So those are some of the things that I'm aware are happening. They're things that need our support at all levels. I mean, a lot of those things are happening because there were, people went to the state legislature and said, we need to make a difference for our kids. What can we do? Where is some funding? How can we be supportive of this? And to be able to universalize those efforts. So there is some of that happening.
There's this thing I love about police officers. They're very direct. And I do a lot of training with them, and I will come in and give them behavioral health primers and signs and symptoms and all of this nerdy therapeutic psychological just stuff that I immerse myself in. And I'm usually met with, early on, this face of, yeah, lady, so what? What does that mean for me? What is the practical tool as a police officer that I'm going to take from this to go impart? And to your point, with a 5th and a 6th grader, we talk about these nebulous ideas of skills and stress reduction and, knowing mental health signs and symptoms. But when it gets down to brass tacks, what are some of the things that are tangible that we can do? Teaching at an early age what an emotion is and where it's felt in the body and why they're feeling that way. Here's a good example. I don't watch the news on TV anymore because I got real good at watching the 10, 20, 30-second snippets, and you're having these things go by really, really fast. And then a commercial would come up, and I would sit and I would think, why do I feel so bad? Oh, I know. I just saw 14 stories in about 22 seconds that bleed or plead or are broken, and I get no time or process or reconciliation of that. I just get to see how horrible something was and move on to the next horrible thing. I'd get this gross feeling in the pit of my stomach, and then I'd be done with that news segment during the commercials and go, why do I feel so awful? Why do I feel so keyed up, so anxious, so worried? Oh, I watch the news. Okay, how do I ratchet down from this? And I would have to go back and think about each of the little stories, how I felt about what I saw, what it means in my little world, and if there's anything at all that I could be doing or should be doing, or if I need to just put that somewhere else because that's somebody else's, my favorite Polish proverb, somebody else's monkey, somebody else's circus. But I worked with so many kids and now so many adults that don't have the ability to connect. I am ragingly angry, and I feel it in the pit of my stomach and the tension in my shoulders. Now that I know that I am angry and I feel it in these places, what do I do to resolve that? And that's that labeling, not just what's happy, what's sad, what's angry, what's surprised, what's scared. It's where do I feel happy? Where do I feel angry? Where do I feel anxiety? Where do I feel sadness? Okay, now I know where I feel it. What do I think the source of that is? Oh, I'm fighting with my best friend. I've got an AP test coming up. I didn't clean my room and grandma's pissed at me, or I am struggling because the girl I like doesn't like me back, or there's a mean boy bully and I don't know what to do. How do I sit with that emotion where it fits in my physiology, process through it, and that could be just up here, that could be with a friend or a parent, that could be with a counselor or a school counselor or a school resource officer, and then reconcile that to the next piece. That mind, physiology, and reconciliation process for me is something that can be taught at a very, very, very early age.
Absolutely, and I wanted to follow in on that. When kids are in high school, and especially the later years of high school, they do seem to have more symptoms that align with what we might say are anxiety or depression. But in elementary school, kids have anxiety and depression. It shows up differently, though. Kids often will have tummy aches or headaches. And there's, one of those things that I wish I had known as well. But there's research that shows that out of Vanderbilt University, which followed a group of kids, both that had unresolvable tummy aches and those that didn't have tummy aches at all. And they watched them over several years and looked at how many of these develop anxiety disorders, how many develop depressive disorders. I'll let you guess. Of a group, how many do you think those that had unresolvable tummy aches developed anxiety disorders? 50%. Versus a control group of 19%. And they followed the same cohort for for several years. Depressive disorders were not as large, but I think it was 25% to 9% versus the cohort that didn't have tummy aches. They look so different in elementary school, and it's not just tummy aches. It's suddenly they're fighting or they're angry or they're throwing things. They don't have the tools. They don't have the vocabulary that they need in order to talk about emotions. And I know there's programs coming in like Second Step that's in Lake Washington School District to help talk about emotions, but that is such a critical piece. Balance in Mind started as a way to try to understand where the gaps were and why we were ending up with kids in their teen years that were dying by suicide or having extreme anxiety and depressive disorders. Out of that, we realized that there actually are a lot of resources in the community, and we just didn't realize that they were there. So we've been trying to connect people with them. But we also realized that parents didn't have a very effective way to get information and to learn about what was going on in the community. And we're in a very high-achieving community, a very high-achieving adult community, which then falls down on the kids. So one of the things that we're working really hard to is to provide parents with information, both parents of elementary-aged kids as well as parents of high school-aged kids. So if you saw this is something that we developed just to start the discussion and to help raise awareness of what risk factors are and what it might look like in your student, whether it's elementary or middle school, high school.
When I was younger, I started first experiencing anxiety around the age of 8 or 9. And like my mom said, it came up with stomach aches. That was the first thing that we realized. And then we started, really dissecting my, I guess they did, started really looking at my actions. And one of the biggest things that I had was separation anxiety towards my mom. So literally, I'm not joking, every single time she would leave the house, I'd have like a full-blown anxiety attack, but I had no idea what it was back then. Because how are you supposed to know what you're feeling if you have no idea what it is? And the biggest thing that helped me, because I had to go to therapy, when I was 9, because she put me in it, which was the best thing for me. This is anxiety. Even at such a young age, I was 9 years old. I had no previous conception of what anxiety was, but I gave it a name. I forgot what the name was.
Agnes.
Well, that's my mom's name for her anxiety, is Agnes. Like, literally giving it a name. Separating it, I'm not joking. And separating it from yourself. Being like, this is a thought that is coming to my head. This is not me. This is my anxiety. Go away. You have the power to push the anxiety away. You just have to realize that what you're feeling is not who you are. It's these negative thoughts that are trying to go into your head, that are trying to work against you, trying to push you into believing, that your mom's gonna die the second that she goes out of the house without you or without you with her. Or it's these crazy irrational conceptions that you force yourself to believe in. So one of the biggest things that I think that you can do is really, helping your child understand, that it's not her, it's her anxiety, and also that you're there 100% for her. And just asking, what can I do? What would be the best for you? Because I'm on your side. I want to help you be the happiest that you can be. And just help her realize that you're on her team and that she won't get in trouble for what she's experiencing.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on a pretty small kind of part of the entire mental health picture, which is kind of the stress induced by school and by academics. That's been a pretty large part of my life, and just coming off of the whole college application process, which was like 10 times more stressful than I could have ever imagined. I think part of it, I don't know if it's a part of what's currently contributing to maybe either your daughter or just kids in 6th grade, their stress, but a big part of it when they get into 7th and 8th grade and in high school is the stress that school induces. And I think a big part of that is just telling them and kind of knowing that it's okay. Like, it's okay if you're not getting this certain grade. It's just like a snowball effect. Like, if I don't get the grade on this test, I won't get into this college. I won't get this job. I won't have a good life. And that's kind of a pretty common thought in a community like ours, where we do see all these people with those jobs. So I think that's a big part of it, having those conversations really early, like 5th and 6th grade, like, it's okay. We want you to try your best, but it's really okay, yeah.
There's so much implicit pressure, and we always told our kids, whatever you do is fine, we just want you to be happy. Sure. Sure. Turns out we had a lot of implicit expectations of what our children should and shouldn't do. And it's through a lot of work that we have let go of many of those expectations and realized they were ours and not hers. Like going to college. Yeah. And it's part of being real mindful that it is their journey. I am there to support you, but it is your journey at the end of the day. And your journey will not look like anyone else's.
I'm going to put on my educator hat for a second. So I have watched education for many, many, many years. I've seen the pendulum swing back and forth. I've seen everything. I started out as a preschool director, and I preschool teacher, preschool director, and then I taught kindergarten, and then I moved to college. Try that one. So, but what I've seen over the years, and this is what I talk about to teachers, is that we have removed so many things from the classroom that would have helped these kids not to feel so stressed. We've cut down their recess time. We've taken, okay, so let me just talk about kindergarten. When I was a kindergarten teacher many, many moons ago, we played with blocks. it was the year to prepare them to go into academics. Almost all of my kids left reading to some extent just because literature was so prominent in the classroom. I read 100 books during the year. My goal was to read 100 books to them. We learned to get along socially. And so we've taken the very crucial thing that is necessary in our school system to help kids get along with each other, and we've made that an academic grade. And so we have taken, we can bring in social emotional learning now, but in reality, we're trying to put a Band-Aid on what occurred in the first place, is that these kindergartners coming in needed the social experience in kindergarten in order to be able to move on. And so it is the tide has turned so far that I don't know how we get back to understanding that we've taken the things away that would help this problem at the beginning of their career. I listen to them and I hear the anxiety and the pressure we're putting on children to perform with the tests and everything that we're doing to them. And then we wonder why they're stressed. And so, and anyway, I have stepped up right here to say we need to bring kindergarten back. We need to bring recess back. We need to bring literature back.
So I would love to talk about that because that's a large part of what I do when I do the education process of speaking about being a co-responder. And I'll use a comparison. So I work in 6 police departments. I respond with officers and deputies to 911 calls. And there was this assumption that once we had a co-responding mental health professional, that the calls for service for mental health related or behavioral health related issues would, because somehow the co-responder model was going to wave that magic wand and solve it. First year that each of those departments had their co-responding mental health professional, the mental health calls spiked. And initially, when you look at that data, you go, geez, Susie and crew, I thought you were doing something about this. And look at now your numbers are doubled. The increase in what we're seeing for youth or adult behavioral health and mental health symptoms is gonna go up because guess what? We have more recognition of it now. We see it more, so it's going to look as though it is an epidemic. And I would say that that number has always been there. We just have the right lens on to see it now. Second, I would offer to the point that we've already been hearing is that we have taken away the things that in an academic or in a school setting created more well-rounded, capable individuals. And by that, I mean, we have had, and I've seen it in my lifetime, a shift to having academics be the lead goal for what you do in school. And if you somehow don't fit on that train, then somehow you are not successful. We have taken away music programs, art programs, sports. We have taken away recess. We have taken away the time in which a student would actually get social interaction and interpersonal interaction as a point of education. And there cannot be, as far as I'm concerned, academic success without the parallel of that interpersonal development. And that is that emotional and feelings recognition and how to relate to the person sitting next to you. The other thing to your point about being a coach that I think is wildly important is it's not just about being fit and playing a sport and practicing and doing it well, but about the fortitude to learn a skill, how to win gracefully and lose professionally, and how to cope with the feeling of loss if you don't win. Instead of giving a trophy for showing up to everyone, we've lost this skill to feel distress. The 911 calls I go on, girlfriend just broke up with me, boyfriend just broke up with me, I'm gonna kill myself. There is so little distress tolerance capabilities, and art and music and sports and those social interactions teach how to hold that discomfort. And when we monitor the increases and the development of social media, the respite that kids were getting by going home from the bullying, from the standards, from the expectations, from the judgment of what you should be versus what you could be versus what you are somehow is not good enough anymore, has been deleted because you get the constant feedback in a social media setting that you used to be able to leave when you left school. And so if we don't look at all of that in a metered response, I'm going to get more calls, my partners are going to get more calls, and we're going to continue to see this level of anxiety and mental health, behavioral health symptomology, because our kids are going to be looking for the things that will make those feelings be satiated. And that can be drugs, alcohol, risky behavior, that can be depression symptoms, failings in schools. But I will offer this also. You may have a student that rises to that occasion and doesn't buckle under that pressure and is an incredible achiever, and they are still feeling the anxiety, the depression, the pressure, the anger, the sadness, and the fear, and they are just as bad off, quote, as somebody that you can see that recognition of, because they are coming to you and having a level of dysregulation that is finally getting noticed.
I internalized. I was an A student. I had a California full ride state scholarship. I was dissociative. I thought I was demon possessed. I had horrible, I had lived with a level of trauma that no child should ever live with, not out of my family. I just want to say that. Success was a way for me to survive. And so my PhD after my name was my survival and my way to validate and my way to deal with all this. But I came completely apart at the age of 60. And when we say it's not that mental health problems didn't exist, it's that they were hidden, they were invisible. And the culture I grew up in, nobody talked about that. Nobody, but it internalized it. So I am so grateful we're talking about it. I never dreamed that I would sit on a platform and talk about mental health issues because it was not in my frame of reference. I really thought my life was over when I came and started telling my story. I thought it's over, it's done. And so, but we will see more because, and thank goodness, because the kids that were me were talking.
Yeah.
And they're getting help.
What is success? You know, that's a good question that needs to be asked. What is success defined by? Is it defined by going to an Ivy League school? Is it defined by getting a job in a high-tech industry? Is it defined by being a millionaire, having a great house, having a nice car, whatever it is? Like, for me personally, success is happiness over anything. I prioritize, now that I went through my mental health journey, happiness literally over everything. And when I was younger, I was taught the opposite of that. You know, growing up in a society that is so affluent, Kirkland, Bellevue, it's a bubble in comparison to the rest of the world. And there is such a high amount of pressure around here, at least for me personally, you know, growing up with two parents that were in the high-tech industry, growing up with a, you know, in Kirkland or Bellevue area it's rough. I went to a college prep middle school. The fact that they're prepping you for college and middle school is ridiculous, first off. But I mean, we literally had 8 classes. Like, I would go home and do homework for 6 hours a day, and I was 13, 12, you know? It was ridiculous. The amount of stress and pressure that was put on me was horrible because I was taught that there was only one path, you know? Up until I fell apart at 16, I was dead set that I was going to go to an Ivy League school. You know, I had perfect grades. I would literally kill myself to get perfect grades. The first time I got a B when I was 16, I cried. To make up for the fact that I got a B, I decided it would be a great idea to take 4 AP classes my junior year. And that was after taking every single possible advanced class that I could take. And it killed me, you know, like literally I had no time for anything other than school. The idea, the conception of happiness was no longer there. It was just, I mean, it wasn't even talked about. Like, I don't know. The biggest thing that I can say to help your kids, to help anybody, is to teach from the youngest age that success is not defined by getting a good job. It's not defined by the things that you accomplish. It's defined by the person that you are.
We were, I mean, yes, you had a lot of expectations on you. And, but I think there are expectations that in many ways we all put on our kids, again, just implicitly. It's not like we ever said to you, You have to get the best paying job ever.
The school that you went to.
Okay, that was a mistake. That one I own.
And
Oh,
I want to say that right there is how we change the world, is for a parent to say, okay, that was a mistake.
yeah.
Okay, I just want to say that right there.
As somebody who experiences my own mental health issues, my friends also experience a huge amount of mental health issues. I mean, the number of times I've been called because my friends are like, I'm about to kill myself, or I don't want to go into details and everything, but there's been a lot of horrific situations where, these kids, these 13, 14, 15-year-olds, they're in a crisis mode, but they have no idea what to do. And their friends are like, you can't tell my parents, you can't do this because I'm going to kill myself. I'll hate you, whatever. So it's put in a pickle. You just have no idea what to do. I mean, it's like being inside of a box that's locked. Like, you don't have any idea how to break through it. And I think the thing that helped me the most is really understanding that in order to take care of my friends, in order to help the most amount that I'm capable of doing, I need to put myself first. I need to prioritize myself. I need to take care of myself, because if I'm not here, I can't help anybody. And so really, really, really emphasizing that and helping have these, conversations, just asking, are you okay? Like, to your kid who's dealing, who's helping their friends, are you okay? What can I do to help you? How can I help you help other people? If that makes any sense.
And how can we help your friends to get help? It needs to be
Exactly.
more than you. That idea that it always has to be sort of the team approach, and just like when we were talking about the teachers being able to recognize the problem and respond to it warmly, but then to realize that no one holds all of those pieces to be able to help that person, and that we really, and this is something that the behavioral health support specialists do work on when they're working with youth in the schools, and youth sometimes will bring their friends, right? Or they'll talk about their friends, and you can see the stress of carrying that weight for their friends, where they talk about, okay, what is your side of the street and what is somebody else's side of the street? That idea that you don't have control over everything or everyone. You can respond, but you're not responsible for the outcomes of that. And so I think, again, it is partly an education process, and it's also that kind of warm relationship process. And it's a mix of those two things. And again, having those resources. And one exciting thing that's coming along is that they're just now doing pilots of the teen-to-teen mental health first aid. That should be being tested out at International Community School this year, with the hope that we'll be able to have the resources and the supports to roll that out kind of more in the district, so that it does that first educational piece for kids. But I think it's all of us, again, saying, it's good to be a loving, caring friend, and that's to do the part where I hear you, I see you, and I'm going to get you some help. And also about when not to kind of keep secrets, or, when privacy is a harmful secret. I mean, because I think that's a really hard thing for a 13-year-old to deal with, right? Yeah.
Developmentally, there is a point in a youth's life where their parents or their caregivers or their guardians are not the person to whom they go when an issue comes up. It becomes the circle of friends. It becomes that core group of people whose camaraderie, whose connection, whose similarity then dictates that person's actions and interactions. And that tends to be the safety net in which the kiddo will go to. Because I have this prevention mindset, here is what I would offer, and I need to say this very loudly and clearly. Suicide is an individual act. I don't care who you are and who you reach out to, whether it is your best friend, your parent, your grandma, your counselor, police officer, me, whoever. If somebody elects to commit suicide, it is a singular act. And it leaves in its wake a huge track of destruction because everybody plays the coulda, shoulda, woulda game. And it is wildly unfair to those that were privy to that person's thought process. It is a single act. It is no way the fault of the person with whom they reached out to that that act was committed. If it was, it wouldn't be suicide, it would be murder. So, to that end, with a prevention mindset, I think it is incredibly important to structure youth communication so that we're doing this before. We all know stop, drop, and roll, and duck and cover. How many fire drills and earthquake drills have we done in our lives? I think part of that discussion should also be for me to be a good friend to you. If this ever comes up, I want you to know unequivocally you can come to me. But also know that if you come to me with this, here are the things that I'm going to do. I will stick by you and support you the best that I can, and I'm going to reach out to an adult that can help. And if that adult can't help, I'm going to find another one. Do not ask me to keep a secret from your parents or your sister or your best friend. If you are coming to me because you feel this way, you are coming to me because you trust me now and you trust me in the future. So trust that you and I now have this agreement that if you say these words to me, send me pictures, say you're cutting, and it's non-lethal self-harm that could move into the realm of something more harmful, then I am going to reach out to somebody I trust. That way the onus is not on that youth if their friend does commit that singular act, and that act is not done in absentia, where a school program, a teen-to-teen counseling, or a peer-to-support counseling methodology, or even a school counselor or a first responder can reach out in a way that is helpful. The worst thing that you don't want to sit with is that I shoulda, coulda, woulda done something, and I shoulda never kept that secret. And as Ava was saying about prioritizing her sense of self and happiness first, if somebody comes to me that's suicidal, I have a disclosure statement. And it's very clear in federal and state law that if you come to me and say you want to harm yourself, harm someone else, or you can't take care of yourself, I don't get to keep that secret. If I keep that secret, I lose my license. If I keep that secret bad enough, I may go to jail. I'm a mandatory reporter. And I think that that mindset needs to be for anyone who's got a disclosure of suicide to them. You're a mandatory reporter because you are not able to handle that on your own, and you need to reach out to somebody. And having that discussion before something crappy happens is incredibly powerful.
Like, if you really think about it, nobody who loves their life is gonna go and scream at people. I don't know, the big changing moment is really just when somebody was blunt and asked me about it. It was like, are you going to kill yourself? And at that point, the answer was yes. But because I had that person to ask me it, and to be honest and to be okay with uncomfortable questions and uncomfortable conversations, that's how the difference, the really big difference was made, and, why I'm still here today. So, yeah.
I would say that humans by nature, by very physiology, are avoidant of danger and trouble. We're taught to do that. Our central nervous system says, lions, tigers, bears, run. I need food, safety, shelter, and clothing, and I'm good. I want routine, I want safety, I want that. I don't want to run at things that are tough. Because we no longer live in a society where it's lions, tigers, and bears in a physical sense, we have this in an emotional sense. We have this in a social structure sense. And when we get to a position where we are feeling an emotion that I would compare to a lion, tiger, or a bear, we are trying to avoid that. I don't want to feel this way anymore. I don't want to feel loss. I don't want to feel that my girlfriend broke up with me. I don't want to feel that my parents are disappointed in me. I don't want to realize that I'm going to be a failure in the future because I could not pass calculus. I don't want to be this person that isn't skinny enough, that isn't pretty enough, that doesn't have the right car, the license, the expectation, the boyfriend, the whatever it is. And I think that there is a skill set there in avoidance of a problem rather than learning how to hold that problem. And that is failing with grace. That is dusting yourself off after something goes completely sideways and saying, okay, I'm not going to let this kick me down to the point where I can't function. I think there is a level of recognition of how to hold that loss, that disappointment, that fear, that change in expectation. And I do think that realizing after my life has gone the way that it has, that expectation is the source of much disappointment. versus what something is rather than what it should be. Who you are in this moment is good enough as you sit, not as you think you should sit or how somebody else should view you. And through the lens of social media and just what we see as we walk down the road, we get this perception of this is how we should behave, look, and be in order to somehow be societally acceptable. But if there were thought bubbles over everybody's head, everybody's doing the same thing. Please don't notice that I, need to lose 50 pounds. Please don't notice that I don't drive a cool car. Please don't notice that I've got 100 grand in student loans or whatever it is. And so I would offer that the recognition of emotional avoidance can be a preservation and survival thing in the moment that something is happening. And by all means, do it in a crisis and survival mode. But at the point that that crisis has subsided, to find a way to hold it and to find the people that you can surround yourself with that can hold it with you. That way that you get the muscle memory, you get the central nervous system and the synapses and the brain pathways to say, oh, there's that crappy feeling where I didn't win again, or here's that, oh, he rejected me feeling, and it will pass. No emotion you've ever felt in your life has ever lasted 24/7. If it did, you'd die. We're not built to feel those emotions permanently. They ebb and they flow. And if we can teach the skill set to hold what that is and face it, losing by grace, feeling disappointment, feeling rejection, feeling joy, feeling achievement, and know that all of that is transitory and that you just need the ability to hold it for the time that you have to, then we are going to find infinite success in our youth's ability to handle interpersonal issues just as well as they would handle an academic failure or success. Those skill sets are taught in sports. Those skill sets are taught in art and in music. And what I love about music is that those successes and failures you hear almost immediately when you hit a wrong note, but you can't stop playing the song. You gotta keep going. You're running a play and you miss the ball, you don't just walk off the field, you keep going. You paint something and you mess it up and you slap some more paint over it and try to make it better. And that methodology actually travels quite well across how you would hold an emotional expectation and learn to just, you know what, today I failed miserably. Today I went down in a ball of flying flames and I got fired or I got an F or I had somebody tell me they don't like me or whatever. Tomorrow's gonna be better. Tomorrow I get to try again. And maybe I don't get to try again alone. Maybe I go find a buddy that helps me try so that I'm not alone.
And some of that is that modeling that we talked about earlier and the importance of that. And when Val said, yeah, you're right, Ava, that was my mistake, and I apologize for that, is owning it, is being able to be vulnerable and to kind of introduce that and in that says, yes, I mean, I might have these credentials and these things, and I have this life experience. And today I'm here kind of with all of that, right? I mean, it's like, today, actually, I think I do have two of the same earrings on, but the other day I was in a meeting and my colleague looked at me and said, oh, I really like that look, Christy, that, those two different earrings that you're wearing. That's really kind of chic. And I'm like, oh, well, that wasn't like actually meant to be chic. That was like, I remembered that moment when I was like, which of these pair of earrings shall I wear? And I apparently ended up with one of each of them. So it's being able to be kind of that person who, I'm kind of just a person too, because we all are, no matter what else. And we all have our things that we're struggling with. And you can see how helpful it is to all of us to come together as human beings authentically and talk about these things and share about them. And it helps us all start to think about what could be some next steps to do that, right? I can't do that by myself. I need to hear kind of what you're holding as the teacher, what you're holding, kind of as the parent of the elementary school student or the 13-year-old who's had these experiences. I need to hear from Ava and from Matthew. And I really appreciate hearing, from my adult colleagues and sort of how professionally and personally they've navigated through all of this. We all need to have those conversations.
And you're never too old to learn. As I keep telling the kids, I may be 55, but I'm still learning.
Right, life's a marathon and we're not getting out of it alive. So just let's try to do it day by day if we can.
Thank you so much. thank you to everybody for being here today. I know that we could have this conversation for the next 8 hours, but I want to make sure that that we respect your time, and also that we point out every way that there is for you to help. And we invite you to connect with us. You can like our Balance in Mind Facebook page. It's one way to connect with a community that is moving and shaking and really trying to make a difference. Some words to say, some actual verbiage for you on actually having the talk using open-ended I statements. Saving those crisis lines that are listed on that green brochure, save them in your phone. If somebody is in a crisis, sit down and use them beside them, with them, and find ways to help. They really do work. And lock up all your prescription medications and weapons, especially if you're worried about any of your kids or their friends. Or what if you just don't know? It's best to keep everything locked. Taking a youth mental health first aid certification class. I know we have 3 trainers in here. We have Denise, we have Vanessa, and myself. We would love for you to come and take this class. It will build your confidence level to know how to help and to notice when you might need to offer help. It's a huge game changer. And then there's also little things you can do if you have some time with the Lake Washington Schools Foundation. There's a Links program. You can become a mentor, a lunch buddy, and you can fill that gap that the teachers so need to have trusted adults out there with your kids as well, because we need a lot. We need an army. So that could be you. And we also on the back of this put risk factors and protective factors, and knowing where that bassinet is going in and how to keep it from going in is in that protective factor. Red flags of knowing common things to look for. And then we also put the action plan for youth mental health first aid at the bottom, which is algae, which is what we teach in the first aid courses. So hopefully you'll take this. We have extra copies if anybody wants to take some and give them to your children, your friends, anybody you want, and let's have more conversations like this. We also have parent webinars coming up through Balance in Mind, and lots of things that we're stirring up, like this conversation that we had today. So I want to thank everybody for being here. If we can have just a quick takeaway sentence and a big thank you to our panel today. If you guys could leave everybody with just one quick thing, what would you leave them with? And we'll go for it.
I already told my stair tripping story, and I don't want to relive it because, but Chris was nice and it was a good dance. I'm going to leave a stack of my business cards here. They are all the contact numbers and phones that I have from my departments. If you have questions about where law enforcement and crisis response intersects with calls for welfare, suicide, or even resource referrals that are appropriate for whatever your given circumstances are, grab one. And on the back, there are King County and Snohomish County resources also that you can reach out to.
I just want to thank everyone for showing up. As a parent, it is so overwhelming to guide your child through life, and you showing up here and being interested and motivated to do what you can to help them on their journey help everyone on their journey is very powerful. I wanted to let you know we do have these flyers as well that we put together that have some statistics, and then on the inside, they have resources in our community that you can access. And so feel free to take those. They're more for parents than for kids, but feel free to show them to your children as well.
I got my own. Thanks, though. Oh, you're so welcome. Okay. My thing that I would like to end this with is this is my life mantra. I literally, every single day, I live my life by this, is this too will pass. No, seriously, she laughs because it's my motto.
That's because I said it for so many years.
Exactly, because it's true. It will pass. Even when you convince yourself that it won't pass and that it all sucks, it will get better. Time heals everything. That's a statement for a reason. Everybody says it because it's true. And don't give up trying and pushing yourself to get better, because eventually it will happen. So yeah.
I just want to say I was kind of surprised to end up here. And I have enjoyed this so much. And I am so grateful for communities that are trying to help. And I can't imagine how different my life would have been if we had understood mental health, if my parents had understood how to help me, if my community, if my schools had understood. So I'm just grateful for to see this community and that you're doing this. And as an author, I would be remiss if I did not say that I happen to have some books with me, but not very many because I need to do another order. But anyway, I have a few, and my book was my gift of love to the whole world. That is sold in Tasmania and Africa and everywhere, and I don't even know how that happened, but all I know is that I sat on the therapist's couch and I said, if I can ever help one person. So to be here today and actually help the teens is just a gift beyond what I could have ever expected. So thank you for having me.
So it looks like a lot of the people in the audience right now are parents. So I just want to say thank you for coming. And you are one of the most powerful tools in your kid's life. So I'm really glad that all of you got more tools today, or just knowledge in general.
Well, and I think that part that was mentioned earlier about there are many different paths to success and really kind of learning to walk that talk. Just really simple things like we learn from mistakes. Everybody ought to be able to make mistakes. Human life is valuable, worthwhile. The universe said yes to you. You're here. We want you here. Stay here. Many, many things like that. And then along the lines of kind of the book and the other things, Kevin Hines that was mentioned earlier is actually the speaker at the Youth Eastside Services breakfast in March. So if you are interested in that, you might look at the website for that. Carrying his message of hope, really. Hope. That's a good place to end. Hope.
Thank you again, everybody, for coming today, and feel free to talk to people. Round of applause.
Thank you, Barbie, for all that you did in putting this together.
And thank you, Life Community Church. Thank you, Mike.